Thanks so much, Tianyue, for joining us today. I will briefly introduce you before the questions. Tianyue Wu is Associate Professor of Philosophy at Peking University. He works on pre-modern theories of mind, emotion, morality, and free will. He has published widely on those themes in journals such as the Review of Metaphysics, Oxford Studies in Medieval Philosophy, Res Philosophica, among many others. Tianyue has done also extensive research on Augustine in particular, and his latest publications deal with Aquinas' theory of the soul and action. Thank you again, Tianyue, for being with us today.
Okay, Guido, thanks a lot for the invitation, and it's also a great honor and a pleasure for me to meet you via Zoom.
Yes, so the first question I thought of asking you is just for you to tell us about your research agenda and your projects to briefly introduce your viewers. So what have you been interested in lately?
Recently, I'm quite interested in an old question in free will and moral responsibility in ancient and medieval philosophy. So I got funded by China. Let me think what's the English translation of the funding is. It's a sort of national endowment of Chinese government and to support works on humanities and the social sciences. And it's a sort of ground historical overview of philosophical discussions on free will and moral responsibility in ancient Greek, Roman, and also medieval period. And I would like to discuss important figures like Plato, Aristotle, some Stoic and Epicurean philosophers, Augustine, of course, and also Boetius, Aquinas, and some other Duns Scotus, Buridan, and some other medieval figures as well. And in recent days, Chinese philosophers are very fascinated with the topic of free will in general. And actually recently there is a debate about the discovery of the notion of will and free will in the history of Western philosophy. So people mentioned Aristotle and Augustine in particular, but also some less well-known philosophers like Epictetus is also discussed in this context. Yeah, of course, there are also discussions from more contemporary perspective, but to my knowledge, most of participants in this debate are especially interested in the history itself. As I mentioned, they would like to know who first discovered or invented the notion of the will in the history. And so I hope my expertise can contribute to this debate. And yes, my main field is medieval philosophy, but I also work a lot on ancient philosophy, ancient Greek philosophy as well, especially Aristotle. Yeah, because I think Aristotle is very important for people working on medieval philosophy, especially for Aquinas. So I hope that I can combine my interests in both ancient and medieval philosophy together in this approach, and to rather than to know who invented the invention of the notion of will or free will, I would like to know how how these philosophers in the known past can still contribute to our contemporary discussion of free will and moral responsibility. I think we still can learn from philosophers like Aquinas, Aristotle, and Buridan as well. Yeah, so I hope that I can finish this research project in the coming 3 or 4 years. And I already write some papers in this regard. Especially, I published a book on Augustine's moral psychology of will, which was based on my PhD dissertation. And I also published papers on Aquinas' conception of mixed acts. Yeah, so it's a discussion about actions mixed of voluntariness and involuntariness. Yeah, and I also hope that I can write something on for instance, on Plato's discussion of responsibility in Timaeus, and also on Aristotle, of course, on his own conception of mixed actions in Nicomachean ethics, as well as in Eudemian ethics. And yeah, so I know it's such a ground project. Probably I need to devote the the rest of my life to this topic. Yeah, but I hope that I can finish something for this research project in the coming 3 or 4 years. And certainly I will continue my approach to this field. Yeah. And another thing I'm working is it's called it's like a introduction to ancient and medieval philosophy. I mean, ancient and medieval wisdom philosophy. Yes, and I call it 15 lectures on ancient and medieval philosophy. I have been teaching a course called Introduction to Wisdom Philosophy for about 12 years. And normally this course is divided into 2 terms. One term for ancient and medieval philosophy, another term for early modern and German classical philosophy. So I only teach the first part of this course, yeah, because that's my my fields. So after about 12 years of teaching this course, I think it's time to write a sort of introduction for my students and also for other people interested in Western philosophy in China. Yes, we already translated some very good textbooks into Chinese. For instance, I myself translated Marenbong's medieval philosophy, historical and philosophical introduction into Chinese. And my student translated Christoph Schild's ancient philosophy into Chinese as well. Yeah, it was published by Routledge as well. And yeah, there are also other good textbooks as well. But I think Chinese readers might have some other concerns when they approach Western philosophy from their own perspective. So I think I need to address these concerns in my own introductions. And in these years of teaching, I also noticed some spatial difficulties for Chinese students. For instance, for the for the translation and the interpretation of the verb to be in A9 or AC in ancient Greek and Latin. Yeah, and because we didn't have we don't have such a verb in our own language. Yeah, in ancient Chinese, we even didn't have such a copula as well. We use other linguistic tools to replace the copula. Yeah, so that's I think that's a special difficulty for Chinese students. So when I write on Parmenides or Avicenna and Aquinas discussion of Bing and Athens, and so I need to make more explicit to my students to show the different meanings of being in their discussions. Yeah, so this is another thing I have been busy with these years. I already finished the first draft. I hope I can finish the manuscript by the end of this summer vacation. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I hope I can finish it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We also like to ask academics in this section about their research biography, so to speak, how they got interested in medieval philosophy. And I would also like to ask you, how did you got interested in it originally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, when I was an undergraduate student, originally I planned to work on phenomenology. Yeah, in 1980s and the early 1990s, phenomenology and existentialism was quite popular in China, not only among philosophy students, but also among intellectuals in a more general sense. And I was also influenced by by this trend at that time. So at the beginning, I was very interested in Max Scheler in particular. And suddenly I found that Scheler himself was strongly influenced by Augustine and also ancient dualism like magicianism as well. So when I was in my third year, there was a chance to do independent research. Yeah, it was funded by universities. The university encouraged undergraduate students to do some research. Yeah, at this stage. So I think probably I need to know more about the historical background of Scheller's conception of the body in particular. So I read Augustine. I also read the Bible, especially especially Paul's epistles, Romans, and I also read some later philosopher like Descartes, and so at that time I became interested in Augustine as well, and but I didn't make up my mind to just focus on medieval philosophy at that time. So at the fourth year of my my BA, my undergraduate studies, one of my teachers told me that there was a bilateral agreement between Peking University and the KU Leuven in Belgium. So this exchange scheme was designed to train future philosophy teachers for Peking University. So my teacher told me that our department needs someone to work on medieval philosophy in the future. So he asked me if I would like to do to do a PhD in this field. So I thought that was a good chance for me to go to study abroad. And I already became interested in Augustine. So I decided to choose Augustine's early dialogue, the Libero Arbitrio, for my BA thesis. And later I was supported by this scheme to go to Leuven to do my pre-doctor degree and also PhD there. And yeah, I wrote my master thesis or thesis for pre-doctors. It's something special in Leuven at that time. So people coming from other universities need to do this before they were admitted to PhD program. It's something like MPhil. It's an advanced master degree. So I needed to take some courses and also to finish a thesis. So I wrote a thesis on Augustine's conception of the will in his early works, and later I wrote my PhD dissertation on voluntas and libertas. Yeah, so it's a discussion of Augustine's conception of the will in the domain of moral psychology. Yeah, so that was the beginning of my research on medieval philosophy. But another thing I want to mention is that when I went to Leuven, I was also strongly influenced by the known history of Thomism there. So each year, the Institute of Philosophy offer courses called Aquinas in Context. I took quite a few versions of this course because each year they change the text they read, sometime on, for instance, sometime on treatise on law or on a treatise on cardinal virtues. Yeah. So I took all courses of Aquinas in Context when I was in Leuven, and I find Aquinas was very helpful in training my philosophical thinking. Yeah, in a more how to say, in a more analytical way. I also at that time I also thought that probably Aquinas is more important for Chinese students of philosophy than Augustine, because Augustine in some cases is a little bit emotional and rhetoric, and not so strong in argument. So I still love Augustine very much. He still has some insights that other philosophers cannot have. Yeah, but I think for the students, for those who just begin their research in Western philosophy, I think Aquinas is more helpful. So when I returned to China, I decided to focus on Aquinas. Actually, I didn't teach a course just on Augustine where I returned, but I did teach some courses on wholly devoted to Aquinas. For instance, on his on being and essence, and also some parts of the Summa, like the parts on emotions, the parts on happiness and actions, and also on human nature in the Prima part. And yeah, so so some of my students they went to do PhD on Aquinas rather than on Augustine. Yeah. Okay, so I think that, yeah, that's what brought me to medieval philosophy, especially to Augustine and Aquinas.
Thank you. I was also meaning to ask you about the context of Chinese research in history of philosophy. You mentioned in the beginning already something very interesting that you have been teaching for many years, the course on Western philosophy.
Yeah.
I was meaning to ask you if you can share something more about the trends in scholarship there, or in which contexts is medieval philosophy studied in China?
Yeah, the course I mentioned is obligatory course for all students in philosophy. I know that in most of philosophy departments in China, this sort of course is obligatory as well. And it's so I think it's also an important course for Chinese students to know philosophy in a more general sense. Yeah, so I often designed the course in thematic ways. So I divided the historical material into different branches: metaphysics, ethics, epistemology, political philosophy, philosophy of religion, of course, as well. So at that time, I didn't teach we also have a course called Introduction to Philosophy, but at that time, it was taught by my colleagues. They only read 1 or 2 books in that course. For instance, Plato's Apology and Descartes' Meditations. Yeah, but I think that's not sufficient for students to know the whole vision of philosophy. Yeah, so I also designed my course to cover this branch in general. So each time I try to give a very brief introduction to contemporary discussions. For instance, when I teach free will and moral responsibility, I will first tell them what is compatibilism, incompatibilism, and do we need a concept of will to understand free will problem in contemporary discussions? And then we go back to historical stuff, and we try to see how different are these philosophers in ancient and medieval periods, yeah, from ours. Yeah, that's my approach, but I don't think that's a very popular approach in China now. I think more and more young scholars are taking this approach. but senior professors would like to stick to a more historical approach to the history of Western philosophy. So they just give a historical overview. They just tell people what Parmenides or Plato says in this context, what is the theory of forming Plato's, yeah, just like this. Yeah. And but in general, and I think most of professors and students in philosophy departments in China think Western philosophy is very important for their own research, no matter whether they work on Western philosophy or Chinese philosophy or Marxism. Yeah, they still think that it's important to know Western philosophy, not only contemporary discussions in in Anglo-Saxon or continental philosophy today, but also to know the known history of Western philosophy. So at the very beginning, Chinese scholars believe that medieval philosophy is an essential part of the known history of Western philosophy. Even though we don't have many, we didn't have many experts before, but I think most of departments still think that they need to offer courses to cover medieval philosophy, at least, partially, And so they also think that Christianity as a background, an important background to Byzantine and medieval Latin philosophy. So it needs to be studied in this background as well, in this context as well. And I think that my colleagues and my students who are mainly interested in Chinese philosophy also love to attend courses on and conferences on medieval on Western philosophy, including medieval philosophy, and they think that they can get some conceptual tools from the Western counterpart, as well. So so I also once organized a conference to bring people working on two different traditions, people working on Western philosophy and people working on Chinese philosophy. I organized such conference with my friend Marenbong from Cambridge. So he brought some scholars from Cambridge and from UK, and I invited my colleagues at Peking University. So we discussed topics like the body and the self in these two different contexts. I also organized a panel in Beijing Forum, and it's called something like reason and emotion in Eastern and Western traditions. So we have scholars not only from China, but also from South Korea, and also scholars from America, from Europe. And they gave papers on Aristotle, on Aquinas, on and also some Renaissance figures I forgot, but also on Confucius and some later Confucian philosophers in China and also Taoism as well. So it was a very interesting platform for people to meet, to exchange their ideas. Yeah, and I had hoped that we could have some cooperation in this field from a comparative approach, but it had not happened yet. So maybe we need to do more on this, because you know that people from different backgrounds, they have their own ways of working. It yeah, it needs some time for them to get to know how other people are working on similar topics in their own field. Yeah, I think I need to do something more in the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting and intriguing, I think, and it anticipated my last question, which was precisely about which kinds of forums there are or can be created to foster more cooperation between scholars in China and scholars in Europe or in America or in South America, elsewhere. You already mentioned the perspective of doing conferences on comparative approaches in philosophy. And I was wondering if you could say something more about the spaces, the forums that can be created to foster more cooperation between scholars elsewhere in the globe.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that with the help of my colleagues, I helped establish the Chinese Society for Medieval Philosophy. So we already organized 3 national conferences in medieval philosophy. Yeah, the last one was in Hangzhou this year. So we gathered 51, I think, yeah, 51 scholars from different parts of China, and we discuss medieval philosophers from church fathers to even to Martin Luther. Yeah, not really a medieval philosopher, but yeah, but also strongly influenced by scholastic philosophy as well. And we not only talk about Western Latin philosophy, but we also had papers on Byzantine, on Islamic, and medieval Jewish philosophy as well. Maimonides, I remember the one paper on that, and so for the moment, this national conference is mainly for scholars in China, but at the first version, the first version of this conference, I also invited some Western scholars. For instance, Bob Pasnell was visiting us at that time, so I also invited him to give a keynote talk at the conference. So I hope that in the future, when the COVID was over, or when the COVID is over, that we can make this platform more international. We can invite some senior and also young scholars from abroad to join us. Yeah, and I hope that it can become a good place for people from the West and the East to meet. And yes, I mentioned the Beijing Forum, and it was it was also a nice place. It was organized by my university each year, and but I think in the last 2 years it had to be uh, online rather than because of the pandemic. And I hope, that in the future, I would have a chance to organize another panel in this big forum, and this forum is very large. It bring hundreds of scholars many on humanities, yeah, yeah, from around the globe, and I also would like to organize some small scale conference or workshop in the future. And I'm especially interested in bringing people working on ancient and medieval philosophy together. Yeah, in 2019, before the before the pandemic, I organized a conference on the self in ancient and medieval philosophy. So I invited people like Anna Mamadoro and Tobias Hoffman, and also Noboru Notomi, a well-known scholar on Plato in Japan. And so I think I also invited um, uh, Victor Caston, expert on Aristotle from Pittsburgh as well. Yeah, it was a very nice meeting. So we had intense discussions within 2 days, and we also hope that we can continue conference like this sort it for 16 or 12 scholars, and we choose a special topic, and so I think this sort of conference is especially helpful for young scholars in China. I mean, PhD students and also postdoc and junior scholars as well. Yeah. So that's my plan, and I also organized a series of lectures with my friends at Notre Dame Gateway in Beijing, and it's a center of it's an academic center of University of Notre Dame, and it helped to organize this online series of medieval philosophy. So we invited some both senior and junior scholars, Chinese scholars in this field, and they gave online talks, and they used some platforms to broadcast online, and it seemed to be quite successful. And there I think each lecture attracted thousands of audience online. I probably some even more, and they uploaded the whole lecture to some Chinese websites equivalent to YouTube, and so people can watch it afterwards as well. So because of the pandemic, we suddenly noticed that we can use the the internet in a more efficient way than before. So I think maybe in the future we can also organize this sort of online lectures as well, especially when when it's difficult for foreign scholars to travel to China, so they can give a talk on just at their home and yeah. So that's my plans for the future for organizing conferences online talks. I also hope that we can do something like a summer school, either in China or in Europe or in America. Before the pandemic, actually, I talked with my friends in Europe. We already both university already reached some preliminary agreements, about organizing this summer school, but it was interrupted by COVID-19. So I hope we can relaunch it after the pandemic. So we can bring together not only scholars, but more importantly, students as well, both Chinese students and European or American or students from other parts of the world. Bring them together. I think they are the future of our field, and if we can create a platform for them to meet each other at a very early stage, I think that will be very helpful for them. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Tianyue. We reached the end of the interview with this. I really enjoyed interviewing you, and thank you for your time with us.
Okay, thank you very much.